Hello, my dear dreamer. Tonight, we step into the heart of Harry Potter's memories. Moments of courage, loss, and love that shaped his journey. Picture him by a crackling fire, much like this one, as he gazes into the flames, reliving the echoes of Hogwarts halls, the warmth of unbreakable friendships, and the sacrifices that defined his destiny. If these fireside stories bring you solace, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to keep the enchantment alive. And join me for more adventures in the wizarding world. Now, let us journey together through the flickering embers of Harry's memories, where the lessons of the past illuminate the path to serenity. The fire crackled softly in the Gryffindor common room, casting a warm, golden glow against the worn armchairs and intricate tapestries. Harry Potter sat alone, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames, though his mind wandered far beyond the room. The castle of Hogwarts was quiet tonight, the distant toll of the clock marking the lateness of the hour. Outside the tower windows, the forbidden forest loomed, its edges blurred by the wisps of mist curling around the moonlit grounds. Harry's scar tingled faintly, a phantom sensation that had never truly left him, even after the final battle. Though Voldemort was gone, the memories remained, etched into his soul like the lightning bolt etched into his skin. As he leaned back in his chair, the firelight danced across his face, illuminating the tired lines beneath his eyes. Lines that seemed far too deep for his 17 years. Hogwarts was more than a school to Harry. It was the only place that had ever felt like home. Yet, even in its protective walls, the weight of his past hung over him like a shadow. He often found himself retreating into moments like this, silent, solitary, and surrounded by the tangible presence of his memories. Tonight, those memories carried him back to a time long before the war, to the moment he first learned who he truly was. Harry remembered the cupboard under the stairs, the suffocating dark that defined his childhood in the Dursleys' house. The spiders had been his only companions there, and he had spent countless nights wondering why he felt so different from everyone else. The revelation of his magical heritage had felt like a breath of air after years of drowning. But with it had come the weight of expectation. The boy who lived, the chosen one, the savior of a world he hardly knew. As the fire crackled, Harry's thoughts drifted to the first time he laid eyes on Hogwarts. The sight of the towering castle, its turrets glowing against the starry sky, had stolen his breath away. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope, a feeling that perhaps he belonged somewhere. That first year had been a whirlwind of discovery, friendships with Ron and Hermione that would shape his life, the wonder of magic, and the chilling reality of the darkness that lingered within the wizarding world. But Hogwarts had not only been a place of wonder. It had been a battlefield, a place where he had come to understand the true cost of war. The friends he had lost haunted him most of all. He thought of Cedric Diggory, his face pale and lifeless beneath the light of Voldemort's wand. He thought of Sirius, whose laughter had been a balm to Harry's soul, snatched away by the veil in the Department of Mysteries. He thought of Dobby, the brave little elf who had died with freedom in his heart and Harry's name on his lips. Each loss was a thread in the tapestry of Harry's life, woven together with the triumphs and the heartbreaks. He often wondered if it was worth it, if the sacrifices had been necessary to bring about the peace they now enjoyed. He knew the answer deep down, but the doubt never fully left him. Perhaps it never would. His thoughts turned to Ginny, whose presence had become a source of quiet strength in his life. Her fiery spirit and unwavering loyalty had been a light in his darkest moments. But even with her, Harry sometimes struggled to let go of the past. How could he, when it was so deeply entwined with who he was? The war had left its mark on all of them, but Ginny had a way of reminding him that there was still beauty to be found in the world, even amidst the scars. The firelight dimmed for a moment as a log shifted, sending a shower of sparks into the air. Harry's gaze lingered on the embers, their fiery glow reminding him of the phoenix song he had heard during the battle in the Chamber of Secrets. Fawkes had been a symbol of hope at that time, just as he had been during the war. The image of the phoenix rising from the ashes stayed with Harry, a reminder that even in the face of destruction, there could be renewal. Harry's mind wandered further, tracing the paths that had led him to this moment. He thought of Hagrid, whose warmth and kindness had been a lifeline during his first year. He thought of McGonagall, whose stern demeanor hid a heart full of courage and compassion. He thought of Snape, whose sacrifices had been hidden behind a mask of bitterness, only to be revealed in the end as the ultimate act of love. The weight of those memories was both a burden and a gift. They were a testament to the people who had shaped him, who had stood by him, who had fought and fallen for the world they believed in. And though Harry sometimes felt unworthy of their sacrifices, he carried their legacy with him, a silent promise to live a life that honored their memory. As the night deepened, the fire burned low, casting low shadows across the room. Harry rose from his chair, his movements slow and deliberate. He stepped closer to the window, his eyes tracing the outline of the forbidden forest. Somewhere in its depths, the centaurs roamed, the acromantulus lurked, and the thestrals grazed beneath the moonlight. It was a reminder that the magical world was as vast and untamed as it was beautiful. Harry placed a hand on the cool glass, his breath fogging the window as he stared out into the night. The stars above twinkled like distant memories, each one a fragment of the story that had brought him here. For the first time in a long while, Harry felt a sense of peace. The past would always be a part of him, but it no longer defined him. It was simply a chapter in the greater story of his life, a story that was still being written. And as Harry turned away from the window, a faint smile on his lips, he felt a flicker of hope ignite with him. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to face it, one step at a time. For in the end he knew that the greatest magic of all was not found in wands or spells, but in the love that bound them all together. Fragments of a war-torn heart. The mornings of Grimmauld Place were quiet now, a stark contrast to the chaos it had once hosted. Harry had spent months restoring the house after the war, transforming its dark, oppressive interior into something livable. It had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where he could retreat, think, and piece together the fragments of his life. The old black family home still bore traces of its former occupants. The tapestry of the black family tree, scorched with disowned names, hung in the drawing room as a grim reminder of the pure blood supremacy that had once defined the house. But Harry had found comfort in the imperfections of the place, as though the house itself understood what it meant to carry scars. He often spent his mornings in the library, poring over the dusty tomes Sirius had once ignored. The smell of aged parchment and leather bindings filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of the tea Ginny would bring him before she headed out to work at the Holly Harpies training grounds. She had encouraged him to take some time for himself after the war. to rediscover who he was outside of the boy who lived. Today, as sunlight filtered through the grimy windows, Harry found himself drawn to a book he hadn't opened in years. Hogwarts, a History. He ran his fingers over its cracked spine. Memories of Hermione's exasperated voice flooding back to him. She had quoted from this book so many times during their school years, often to counter his and Ron's reckless plans. But now, flipping through its pages, Harry found himself drawn to the sections he had once skimmed over. The parts about magical families, the origins of the school, and the long-forgotten secrets buried within its walls. The words painted a picture of a world that felt distant yet familiar, a reminder of the childhood wonder he had once felt before the war stole it away. The sound of soft footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Kreacher shuffled into the room, his wrinkled hands clutching a tray of breakfast. The house elf had undergone his own transformation over the years, his loyalty shifting from the Black family's pure-blood ideals to Harry's quiet kindness. Kreacher thought Master Potter might like toast with jam, the elf said, setting the tray down carefully. His voice, once filled with bitterness, now carried a note of pride. "Thank you, Kreacher," Harry replied, offering a small smile. The elf nodded, his ears twitching slightly as he shuffled away, muttering about dusting the hallways. Harry watched him go, marveling at how even Kreacher had changed. It was a reminder that people, even those bound by prejudice or pain, could find redemption. The thought gave him hope, though it also weighed on him. He couldn't help but wonder if redemption was possible for everyone. Could he forgive himself for the choices he had made, the lives he couldn't save? The thought lingered as Harry left the library and wandered through the house. He paused by Sirius's old room, the door ajar. The walls were still plastered with faded Gryffindor banners and Muggle posters of motorcycles and pin-up girls. It was as if a part of Sirius remained here, defiant and alive. Harry stepped inside, running his hand over the dusty desk. He often thought of Sirius, his godfather's laughter echoing in his mind like a ghost. Sirius had been the closest thing to family Harry had ever known, and his loss still cut deep. But as painful as those memories were, they also reminded Harry of the love that had defined his life. It wasn't perfect or easy, but it was real, and it had shaped him in ways he was only beginning to understand. As the day wore on, Harry decided to visit the Ministry of Magic. He had been avoiding the place, unsure if he was ready to step into the world of aurors and politics. But Hermione had been urging him to consider it, and today the thought of doing something, anything, felt better than sitting with his memories. The atrium of the ministry was a flurry of activity, witches and wizards bustling about with parchment and briefcases. The fountain at its center, once a symbol of pure blood dominance, now featured a new status. A phoenix rising from the ashes, its wings spread wide in a gesture of renewal. Harry paused to admire it, the image stirring something deep within him. As he made his way to the Aurora office, he couldn't help but notice the way people looked at him. Some stared openly, their whispers trailing after him like ghostly echoes. Others offered small smiles or nods, as though unsure how to approach the boy who had become a symbol of hope. Harry ignored them, focusing instead on the task at hand. The Aurora office was a hive of energy, with papers flying through the air and enchanted maps glowing on every wall. Kingsley Shacklebolt greeted him warmly, his deep voice carrying a quiet authority that always put Harry at ease. They spoke briefly about the state of the wizarding world. Kingsley's words, a reminder of how much work still needed to be done. As Harry left the ministry that afternoon, a sense of purpose began to take root within him. He wasn't sure if he was ready to become an Auror, but he knew he wanted to help rebuild the world they had fought so hard to save. The war had taken so much, but it had also given them a chance to start anew. That evening, as Harry returned to Grimmauld Place, he found Ginny waiting for him in the sitting room. She was curled up on the sofa, a book in her lap, and a cup of tea in her hand. She looked up as he entered, her eyes lighting up with a warmth that never failed to steady him. "How was it?" she asked, her voice soft. "Overwhelming," Harry admitted, sinking into the seat beside her. "But good." Ginny smiled, reaching for his hand. "You're doing fine, Harry. You don't have to figure it all out at once." Harry nodded, her words settling over him like a blanket. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Ginny by his side and the memories of those he had lost guiding him, he knew he could face whatever came next. Bonds of yesterday, bridges to tomorrow. Harry's footsteps echoed in the entrance hall of the Burrow. As he stepped inside, the warm scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the earthly aroma of the nearby garden. It had been months since he had visited Ron and Hermione, and though they exchanged letters regularly, the sight of the crooked house still filled him with a bittersweet comfort. This place had been his refuge for so many years, a haven amidst the chaos of his life. Harry, before he could take another step, Hermione appeared in the doorway, her arms outstretched and her expression radiating the joy of seeing an old friend. She pulled him into a hug, and he could feel the familiar blend of her enthusiasm and concern. "I was starting to think you were avoiding us," she teased as she pulled back, her sharp eyes scanning his face. She looked different now, older, wiser, but still the Hermione he knew. "I've been busy," Harry replied with a sheepish smile, trying to figure things out. "Of course you have," she said, her tone softening. "But you don't have to do it alone, you know." The sound of Ron's voice carried from the kitchen before Harry could respond. "Oi, is that Harry? Get in here, mate. Mum's made enough food to feed the entire Cannons team." Harry chuckled as Hermione rolled her eyes, leading him into the kitchen where Ron was helping himself to a plate of treacle tart. The sight of his best friend brought a wave of familiarity that made Harry's chest tighten with emotion. Ron had grown too, his shoulders broader, his face more angular, but his lopsided grin was the same. They spent the next few hours talking and laughing over dinner, the conversation weaving between light-hearted banter and deeper reflections on the past year. Hermione shared updates about her work at the Department of the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, where she was spearheading efforts to improve the rights of house elves and other non-human beings. "It's slow going," she admitted, her brow furrowing, "but we are making progress. The ministry isn't perfect, but Kingsley's leadership has made a world of difference." Ron, meanwhile, was thriving at Weasley's Wizard Wheezy's, where he had stepped in to help George run the business. The shop had become a beacon of joy for the visiting community, a reminder that laughter could heal even the deepest wounds. "It's not the same without Fred," Ron said quietly, his gaze dropping to his plate. "But George says it helps to keep going, you know, like we are honoring his memory by keeping the shop alive." Harry nodded, his throat tightening. He had seen George a few times since the war, and though the grief was still etched into his features, there was also a resilience that Harry deeply admired. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned to Harry's future. Hermione leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Have you given any more thought to joining the Aurora office? Kingsley told me they'd welcome you with open arms." Harry hesitated, his gaze flicking into the window where the stars twinkled against the inky sky. "I don't know," he admitted. "It feels like I've done enough fighting. maybe I need to figure out who I am outside of all that. That's fair, Ron said, surprising Harry with his understanding tone. You've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for years. No one would blame you for wanting something different. Hermione nodded in agreement. But whatever you decide, Harry, just remember, you've got us always. The weight of their words settled over Harry like a warm blanket. For so long he had felt like he had to carry the burden alone. But here, in the company of his best friends, he was reminded that he didn't have to. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room, where the fire crackled in the hearth and the shadows danced on the walls. Hermione pulled out a stack of photographs she had brought back from her parents' house in Australia, where she had restored their memories after the war. Among the pictures was one of the three of them during their first year at Hogwarts. Harry stared at the image, the younger versions of themselves grinning and waving, blissfully unaware of the trials that lay ahead. "We have come a long way, haven't we?" he murmured, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Hermione smiled softly. "We have, but it's only the beginning, Harry. There's so much more to do, so much more to live for." As Harry looked at the photograph, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. The war had taken so much, but it hadn't taken everything. He still had his friends, his memories, and the chance to build a life worth living. When he finally left the burrow that night, the moon hung high in the sky, casting its silvery glow over the fields. Harry felt lighter than he had in months, as though a small piece of the weight he had carried had been lifted. As he walked through the cool night air, he thought about the phoenix at the ministry, its wings outstretched in a gesture of renewal. Perhaps, like the phoenix, he too could rise from the ashes, stronger and more whole than before. The journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, Harry felt ready to take the first step. Later that night, as Harry stood in the garden, the stars above him seemed impossibly bright. He held Teddy in his arms, the toddler already dozing off, his tiny fist clutching the edge of Harry's robe. The weight of the child felt both grounding and liberating, a reminder of the future that lay ahead. "I think we'll be all right, kid," Harry whispered, pressing a kiss to Teddy's head. "We've got a lot to figure out, but we'll get there." Behind him, the lights of the burrow glowed warmly, and the sound of laughter drifted out into the cool night air. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever truly would be. But it was enough. As the wind rustled the leaves and the stars continued to shine, Harry felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope. And with that hope came the quiet understanding that their stories were far from over. New chapters awaited, filled with triumphs and struggles, joys and sorrows. But no matter what came next, they would face it together, bound by the love and loyalty that had carried them through the darkest of the days. For now, that was all they needed. With that, Harry turned back toward the house, stepping through the doorway into the warmth and light of the life he was rebuilding. One step, one moment, one day at a time. And so, my dear friends, Harry slowly goes to sleep, and maybe you have too. So good night and sweet dreams.